How is this possible in a country where cow slaughter is prohibited for India to become the largest beef exporter? My name is Yamini Narayanan. I'm originally from India, and I come from both the Hindu religious community as well as the Brahmin community, which is considered widely and prevalently to be the upper caste community amongst the Hindus in India. And I quote upper caste just because it's such a problematic way of referencing any community as inherently superior. And there's a long trajectory of colonial, oppressive, exploitative practices associated with this community that I wish to acknowledge at the outset, and a lot of it related to the ways in which food politics is debated, understood, and practiced in India. Food colonization in its simplest terms is using what we consider to be food as a way of entrenching racial hierarchies. Okay, it's a way of solidifying racial hierarchies by either privileging certain forms of food as racially acceptable, environmentally acceptable, spiritually acceptable, and demonizing other forms of food as antithetical to all of these sorts of ways of acceptability and legitimacy. India, of course, has experienced significant colonialism in the form of European imperialism historically, and which has a continued legacy onwards. But European colonialism in India both benefited from and also entrenched existing inequalities, and I think it's really important to understand the ongoing legacy and impact of those existing colonialisms as well, right, which are already indigenous and native to India as well. So as an outcome of European colonialism, it was inevitable at some point that India would get her independence. But what was unclear was the shape that the new country would take. India did become a secular state at its birth, but these ongoing tensions where the Hindu right wanted to make India a Hindu state continues on. It has taken India 70 years to sort of entrench themselves as strongly as they have in India today, but India is absolutely on the pathway to suddenly remaking itself from a secular state to a Hindu state. There are many ways in which fascism, racism, other forms of authoritarianism entrench themselves. They entrench themselves through the body of women, children, men, alternative sexualities, people of alternative sexualities, but also animals. And one of the ways in which the Hindu right entrenches itself as a colonial state within the domain of India is through the body of bovines. Beef is overtly politicized in India. Beef consumption in India is a criminal offense in many states. There are some states in India which are run by hardline Hindu nationalist parties that want to advocate for life imprisonment, capital punishment for the consumption of beef. And yet, dairy is celebrated in India as a spiritual food, as a food which is nutritionally perfect, but it's also spiritually perfect. They talk about dairy being the most spiritually pure source of food. But this is only possible by disregarding that dairy also eventually is linked to the slaughterhouse just as much as beef is. India has an industrial scale of cow slaughter. That cannot possibly happen without the complicity of the state and state institutions, such as, for example, the police. Highway authorities, okay, where cows are transported down highways in the hundreds and thousands every single night to slaughterhouses. Town planning authorities who know that there are informal or illegal slaughterhouses operating in vast tracts of cities. There are in fact entire slaughtering regions, not just parts of towns or parts of villages, but entire slaughtering regions and given over to slaughterhouses, right? You can't not know these things. So there is willful institutional complicity as well. In a country which allows breeding of bovines but prohibits their slaughter, the only way to do that is to enter into these sorts of informal, very creative social contracts where you agree to turn a blind eye. So what does it mean to sort of mobilize colonialism, or in this case, a particular form of fascism, authoritarianism, through the body of the animal? How is the cow specifically being utilized, right? Now, in the context of a Hindu religious framework, all living beings supposedly are sacred. So it's all plants, all animals, all insect life, they're all supposed to be sacred. The sacralization of the cow as a uniquely sacred animal in India, as a uniquely holy animal in India, is actually not so much religious as it is political. It's interesting that there's actually no cow temple in India. The Hindu right has always used female or feminized bodies. So they've always used women's bodies as a way of securing the Hindu state. So women are supposed to be pure cultural guardians of the Hindu state. Women are supposed to behave in very pure ways, which basically, of course, limits women's freedoms. Like it's always been a way of reinforcing patriarchy in the context of the Hindu state. So to the body of the cow, the mother cow implicitly represents a Hindu Mother India. So when you send the cows to a slaughterhouse, it's almost like you're sending Mother India to a slaughterhouse. Out of about 35 states, 28 states have cow slaughter prohibitions. How is this possible in a country where cow slaughter is prohibited? For India to become the largest beef exporter. There are two explanations for this. One is that a substantial amount of our beef comes from buffalo. So, because buffalo is also a huge part of Indian dairying. So, it's called cara beef, supposedly lower in quality than cow beef. So Indian beef is highly represented by buffalo beef, but it also comes from the fact that India has an industrial scale of cow slaughtering underground. We have an industrial scale of cow slaughter in India as much as we have anywhere else, because India is a leading dairy country. Now, slaughter end is where you have a very racialized population of very poor Muslims and very poor Dalit communities. Now, Dalit communities were formerly regarded as the untouchables of the Hindu caste, right? Now, untouchability is probably one of the most pervasive and one of the most hideous forms of human rights violations, because what you're saying is that a human being is inherently impure and polluting. So which basically means that even a shadow of this person is a pollutant, right? So basically people who are considered to be part of the former untouchable caste couldn't have access to employment, education, and the fate was really doomed to be living in extremely marginalized and oppressive conditions. This population continues to constitute the major force of the slaughtering end of Indian dairy production, right? So when you talk about the impact of food colonization, India's dairy production is being subsidized by the bodies and by the labor of some of these most racialized communities who are undertaking slaughter underground of cows, the most politically precarious and risky animal to slaughter in India today, right? If you are slaughtering cows in India today, you are really putting your life on the line. You are actually putting your life on the line because you could directly come under the attack of the Hindu right for doing that. But in order to sustain dairy production, cows have to be slaughtered, right? So you have a very racialized, very risky, very precarious, very vulnerable community that is engaged in cow slaughter. So I think the most pervasive impact and the most pernicious impact of food colonization in India today is probably on impoverished Muslim and Dalit communities. So using the cow as a Hindu body, as it were, a female Hindu body, also becomes a way of highlighting who the threats are to this cow, to this Hindu female body, and those are the Muslims, those are the butchers, those are the Dalits, and these are all a threat implicitly, not just to the cow, but implicitly to the Hindu state itself.